Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our webinar. This is Learning Allies College Success Program. This is our webinar, Navigating an Online Coronavirus Landscape, College and Your Professional Next Steps. My name is Katie Otaggio. I work on the College Success Program, and I am going to pass you over to my colleague, Abigail.
Hi everyone, I'm Abigail Shaw, the Mentor Coordinator for the College Success Program. We're happy to have you. I just want to give you some orientation to how this webinar will work. So we have several panelists and our moderator. They're going to be directing the conversation this evening, and then we're going to have Q&A at the end. So feel free to add questions in the chat box, and then we'll use the raise hand feature to take questions from folks in the audience. And I'll tell you now and later, but the options to raise, the quick keys to raise your hand are Alt-Y on a PC, Option Y on a Mac, and if you're dialing in from the phone, it's *9, and I will share those again later, but sit back and enjoy the conversation. I'll pass it back to Katie.
Thanks, Abigail. Just want to do a quick intro for all of our speakers today. First is Caitlin Mongillo. She's one of our CSP mentors and is going to be the moderator today. Caitlin has a BA in English and Secondary Education from Manhattanville College and a master's in social work from Stony Brook University. She currently works as a social worker in the Office of the Public Defender in Southwestern Connecticut. In this role, she aids clients in assessing services, counseling, and supports to ensure they receive equitable legal services. Prior to this, she was employed at the intersection of workforce development and housing, overseeing programs to assist homeless single mothers and people with disabilities. She is honored to share her experiences and wisdom with the next generation of college students. She counts herself fortunate to be a small part of her students' stories. Some of Caitlin's favorite things are witty conversations, relaxing with her family and friends, cuddling her dogs, humongous cups of tea, cozy sweatshirts, and the scent of the air after a rainstorm. She is a wife, a hard worker, a dreamer, a wannabe poet, and humbled to be a CSP mentor. Also with us today is Breandan Ward. Breandan was born in Ireland and diagnosed in 2003 with a genetic form of macular degeneration. He graduated from University College Dublin with a degree in Commerce and French. He started his career at Goldman Sachs and subsequently joined Morgan Stanley, where he held various leadership roles. In his most recent role as Executive Director, Breandan led the Global Margin and Risk Support Operations team. Moving from the private sector in 2016 to pursue further studies, he graduated from NYU with an Executive Master's in Public Administration. Breandan is an Adjunct Assistant Professor at NYU Wagner, where he teaches on disability and leadership. His consulting and advocacy work in these areas includes content development and delivery for Dialogue in the Dark. He is a certified leadership coach. He is on the board for the Xavier Society for the Blind and was awarded the Millennial Gold Medal by the International Academy of Management. Breandan is an avid runner and enjoys foreign languages and travel. We also have Khadija Bari. Khadija is the Student Career Coordinator in the Workforce Development Department at Visions Services for the Blind Visually Impaired. She is also a trained speaker and a member of the Board of Advisors with Respectability. Khadija earned her master's in economics from Hunter College of the City University of New York. She then began her career at Queens College of the City University of New York, working with first-generation college students in their learning in freshman and sophomore algebra and calculus courses. The next step in her career advancement led her to Visions, switching her focus to the professional development of college students and job seekers with visual impairments and other disabilities, and she partners with companies to foster inclusivity in their workplaces. And finally, we have Samantha Stephens, President and Director of First Job Austin. Samantha is a native of Annapolis, Maryland. She served 15 years in the corporate world, 7 of them as Vice President of Commercial Property at the Rouse Company in Columbia, Maryland. In 2002, she co-founded Austin Woman Magazine, successfully selling her half in 2008. Along with job mentoring, she continues her real estate development and management business, Apricot Glen, in Austin, Texas. Over the last 7 years, she has empowered the lives of over 600 graduates and professionals returning to the workforce by guiding them to successful first-time jobs in Austin. What started as simply a desire to help people she knew personally quickly snowballed as others learned about Sam's gift to encourage and prepare candidates for the first job interview and successful employment. Samantha is a graduate of the University of Maryland with a BS degree in retail marketing, a 20-year resident of Austin, Texas, a mother and stepmother to 7 adult children, and a wife to Johnny Stephens, a professional architectural photographer. And Caitlin, I'll swing it over to you.
Stop on the audio. Currently unmuted.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. So we will get started with our panel discussion. I'll ask the questions of our panelists and we'll have some time to chat. Then we'll wrap things up with a Q&A. So the first question is, how has COVID-19 changed the volunteering and internship landscape for students? And how can students locate a virtual internship or volunteer opportunity? And we'll start with Khadija.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Khadija here. Really, COVID-19 had, in March when everything hit, it changed so many summer work plans for so many college students across the world. And really, it was a matter of becoming creative with how can we still make our summer productive. There were so many large international corporations that canceled their internship programs because in light of the pandemic and the amount of time that they had between March and June, it was really difficult to switch to a virtual format. So a lot of them either cut down their recruiting in terms of how many interns they brought on, or they canceled their internship programs altogether. So those who were able to obtain summer work opportunities, perhaps some of you were part of that, everybody was working from home. And I think that was something that was new for many professionals with very long careers. So switching to learning from home as a college student and then continuing that into working from home, I think was a huge change for very many people in a very short amount of time. So really, I think the first factor that changed in this landscape of internships was the fact that now you are working from home. But there were some positives that came out of that. So the flexibility of not having to travel to a workplace. For some individuals, depending on where they're living, travel is not the easiest thing to do. Transportation is not the easiest to arrange. So now that you have the ability to work from home, you have the flexibility. And another huge advantage that I noticed from that was you are no longer geographically restricted to just your zip code or the few zip codes around you. You can now essentially intern with organizations on the other side of the country. Like I personally connect visually impaired college students with internships, and a huge factor of that was I didn't have to worry about them staying in New York and New Jersey anymore. I was connecting them with opportunities on the other side of the country with the West Coast. So that was a huge advantage. And in terms of where they can locate volunteer internship opportunities, the most popular websites that I recommend are internships.com, Volunteer Match is another very popular one, idealist.org, and then there's a huge nonprofit by the name of Lime Connect, L-I-M as in Mary, eConnect.com, and they work with professionals and students with disabilities in the US and Canada, and they're partnered with very many large companies. So I encourage individuals to use them as a resource as well.
Great, thank you so much, Khadija. That's super helpful info. Our next question is, what are some habits or routines students should maintain or begin while working from home? And for this, I know that I always tell students that I'm working with that it's most important to just make sure you're getting up in the morning at a reasonable hour. Don't stay in your pajamas all day, brush your teeth, brush your hair, take a shower, really get your day going, because that's what you'll need to do when you're working. And I know Samantha probably has some thoughts on this one too.
I think you're absolutely right, Caitlin. I am all about getting up. If you can get up prior to noon, that would be really good. And I think showering and getting dressed in real clothes, it just will make you feel more businesslike and more organized. So I recommend that. Also, when looking for a job, it's a fairly heartbreaking task. It's hard to do. So I say set a 3-hour time frame each day, Monday to Friday. spend time looking really for good places to apply. Don't just sit and try and apply to LinkedIn. I think those websites that were listed by Khadija were great ideas, but find some connections. Look through your people you know on LinkedIn or anyone you ever knew in your whole life, and aim to get 3 applications a day done, and then let yourself go. Don't sit and try and beat yourself up for 8 hours a day. It'll just be, you'll get downhearted. It's just not worth it. And then also plan to do uplifting self-care things the other times during the day or on the weekend, so that you have things to look forward to. Also make sure your LinkedIn is an excellent representation of you. It really is your brand. It's the first thing people do is they click on your LinkedIn. And try and go through everyone you've ever known, that Boy Scout leader, the choir director, high school teachers. You never know where an actual internship or job might come from just mentioning it to someone who has an invested interest in you. They always want to help. That's what all of us old people are sitting around doing. We just want to help you. We're looking to just jump in and just ask us what we can, ask us for help, because we'd love to help you. And also just make sure, one of the things I always say to people is make sure that you have your email alerts on and your phone message, a professional phone voicemail on your phone. I think many people these days are not expecting calls from people, but they actually do make a call. So you shouldn't have some auto robot answer on your phone. It should be your voice being professional, saying, you've reached your name, please leave a message. So those are things that you can do that give you habits or routines or make you start to feel professional in your job search.
Awesome. Khadija, do you have any thoughts to add on this one?
Yeah, sure. So, I feel that, job search, like Samantha said, it can be really grueling and it's a tough process. And I think maintaining that balance between self-care and mental health and engaging in that job search process is so important. I think a couple of months into COVID is when I understood what is the importance of self-care, like what does it mean and how much we actually crave that interaction with others. So I think balancing it out with other activities is really important throughout the week. As it was suggested, building routine, that's very helpful. Recreation, whether that's a weekly Zoom get together with your friends, just maybe over dinner or something like that, just to get together, catch up over what happened over the week, whatever it may be, and to talk about that. And fitness, that's something that a lot of people felt was taken away from them. But just a quick Google search, I did it right now before the start of this panel, and I literally just typed in blind exercise virtual. So many audio described exercise classes came up. And if you want to add that to part of your routine, I think is really good too. Like Samantha said, something to look forward to.
Awesome. Great, you guys. So I'm wondering too, once the student or person in general has landed that dream position, a dream internship opportunity, what are some good routines to maintain to keep that role? And I think from my experience, I would just say it's really important to kind of do what we mentioned prior to Samantha and Khadija mentioned about having a really good balance between your professional activities and also making sure at the end of your work day, your interning day, that you have enough time to take care of yourself, to take a hot shower, to have a conversation with a friend, but also to maintain your professionality, to really brush up on what is it like to interface with coworkers from a virtual perspective, talk with people in a professional manner, really brush up on those soft skills for those small talk types of opportunity that still exist even in your workday from home. But I'm wondering, Samantha, if you have any other thoughts on this one too.
Yes, I think once you're in a professional workplace, it's time to adapt. There are a number of things I would do. Reading news or staying up with what's going on in the world is important. You'll find when you're interacting with colleagues, they'll say something about a huge storm off the coast of Florida. And if you don't know what's going on, you're going to look like you're out of it and you're not sort of an adulting, as my kids would say. So I think it's important to just follow along. Also, look at trade magazines or anything about your trade, the industry you're in. Follow them on LinkedIn and or social media, and be up to date on what's the new trend, what's happening, so that you're aware. Another thing is ask the people you work with. I say ask for feedback. If you go to a big meeting, your first meeting maybe, afterwards, get your boss aside, or even a colleague who was in the meeting, and say, hey, I'd love any feedback you have for me on anything I could have done better, or how was when I was presenting, anything I could do a little bit differently. I think just being open and curious about feedback is a really great thing to do. Thirdly, I would say once you're working, be that person that comes in early, be the person who isn't the first to leave, be known for being coachable and being open and being ready to take on that next task. If they say, hey, would somebody volunteer? Make sure you're the one who volunteers. This is who we're going to look to as management. That's who we look at as to who we're going to promote. Or if there's an open opportunity that we're going to recommend to a friend who has an opening, we'll say, well, I've got this one intern and they'd be really good. They seem very eager. So be that one who's kind of out there, even if it feels like you're brown nosing, that's okay. That's how you get ahead in the world. Brown nose, it's the time. Let's see. And I think, I think that was what I was going to say about what things to do once you've got the job.
Great, terrific. I also know too, that it's good to keep up with research in your field. If you can find opportunities for conferences, so many of those now are virtual over Zoom or Teams, really become an expert in the subject area, because people will trust you and lean on you for those bits of experiences that you've gained from pursuing different learning opportunities too. Our next question is more about hiring. So I'm wondering, how has COVID-19 changed the hiring landscape? And for this one, I think we'll start with Breandan.
Hey there. I think so much has changed when you think about it. The physical environment is all different. We've moved online. So we used to apply for jobs online. So that's the same. The interviews are now online. And then our first days are online. And with all this change from physical into the virtual world, it's easy to lose sight of what things are the same. And what I would say to this question of hiring in the COVID world is, don't forget as a candidate to be razor sharp about the values that matter to you. So when you're going into an interview, having completed the application form, submitted your resume, you want the person who you're talking to at the organization, the interviewer, to remember you by 1 to maybe 3 words. So think of what 3 words would sum me up. Perhaps it's my attention to detail, as Samantha said, getting in early, going the extra mile. There are words that really can sum you up in terms of what you bring. And those are words that you want to make sure come out in your application, that come out in your interviews, and come out when you actually start in your internship or in your job. So for those 3 words, I would think about values, because values really don't change that much in the middle of all this uncertainty with COVID and all of the flux in the world. Our values should stay reasonably steady, and those are the rocks we can hang on to in this difficult time. So think first, who am I? What are my values? What do I care most about? And then make sure that those key values come out in your application and in your interviews, even if they're all happening this time online.
Great. Khadija, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I think some parts have stayed the same in terms of hiring. Like, I always still encourage students, even if it's remotely, still look at what's available in your college's career services office online. still attend those college career fairs that are now taking place virtually. Attend any recruitment events, hiring events that are taking place maybe for like an entry-level position in your field. Those are now taking place online, so you don't have to worry about getting there. But I think in terms of the hiring process, much that wasn't talked about before and is a huge topic of discussion now is the idea of video interviews. It's something that we didn't worry too much before. They weren't too common. You had your phone screen, and then generally the next step was 1 or 2 in-person interviews. But now that a lot of things are taking place virtually, the in-person interviews have primarily been substituted by a video interview. Preparation for a video interview is very similar to that you would do for an in-person interview, including doing research about the companies. Like Breandan said, what are their values, what are their mission, what stands out to you? Things that you still continue to need to keep in mind, even if the video interview is taking place in the comfort of your home, you still need to dress professionally. At least your top half needs to look as it would for an in-person interview. You need to be mindful of your surroundings a bit more, the amount of noise, the background. You may need your families or your household member support in this to be respectful of that during the time that you're going to be having your video interview. And another factor that I've noticed a lot when working with low vision or blind students preparing for a video interview is your camera angle. Be very mindful of the device that you're using for a video interview. Make sure whatever platform that is being used for the interview, you have it downloaded ahead of time, whether that be WebEx or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever the case may be. Make sure you're not struggling to get on the platform a minute before the interview is supposed to start. So make sure you're prepared ahead of time for that. And then camera angle, it's so important. For example, using a smartphone versus a computer. So when you're using a smartphone, make sure you have something you can lean your phone against, whether that be a phone stand, a book, something so that your phone is steady and you're not constantly trying to keep your hands still, keep yourself in focus while trying to have this conversation with the interviewer. I generally recommend either use a phone stand or use a laptop so that you don't have to worry about the camera constantly shaking while preparing for your video interview. And, take advantage of your friends and family, whether that be in home, whether that be doing a practice video call with a friend to make sure that you're in frame, just by quick tips on preparing for video interviews.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Khadija. That's really helpful feedback. We all need to take it into consideration in this virtual day and age. So how can we, as students, develop our virtual networks to meet people, to increase our virtual presence and develop those connections that could help us land a job? Samantha, why don't we start with you for this one?
Sure. I tell my students to really take a trip down memory lane with their family or their roommates or anyone they knew in college, and make a big Excel spreadsheet of everybody you've ever known. I mean, the people you knew on your residence hall first year of school who are now maybe graduated and out working. Start looking at everybody you've ever known, put them in a spreadsheet, and then make sure you track down where are they working and find them on LinkedIn and connect with them. And you can do a little note that says, hi, just getting prepped for my job search. Please keep me in mind if you hear of anything. As I mentioned before, next door neighbors to your parents when you grew up, if you've moved, all the neighbors you've ever had, scoutmasters, high school teachers. Just the other day on our call, one of the gals mentioned that she got her first job through her high school teacher. She mentioned, she went back and visited and mentioned that she was looking, and that teacher knew someone who was at a company that was hiring. So you have no idea where a job might uncover itself. So just make a spreadsheet of everybody you can possibly think of, even the barista at Starbucks where you go all the time and you know them. They may be married to someone at Dell Computer and they're hiring. So it just, we have no idea. Just everybody you can ever think about, that's when you start just telling them what you're up to. Have a little elevator pitch that you talk about. I'm graduating in this and I'm looking for this kind of position. And if you hear of anything or know anybody in that industry, I would love to connect with them. you know, and then as you connect with people and you see people on LinkedIn that are at companies that you might be interested in, set up a little 15-minute informational call with them. Ask them about themselves. How did they get into that job? What was the path they took? Any tips for you? Anyone else that they might know at the company or anywhere that you might speak with? You know, this is the way you kind of start to network through people you know. So these are warm calls. These are people who care about you, and it won't be as awkward. It's not like making a cold call. But this is definitely a way that you will be able to network in. I also say, look at your alum groups, join those on LinkedIn. You can, if you go to groups, you can join your trade association or any industry association and look and see if you've got any connections there. They might be connected to your old roommate's father or something. You just never know. So start looking at that on LinkedIn too. LinkedIn is a very good tool to just work concentric circles out from you and just comb through any possible place that might be hiring, looking then at those companies and looking for job openings, and then, you know, working your connection to see if they might recommend you. Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Great. Khadija, any thoughts on this one?
Or so, yeah, I mean, I think it's always easiest to start with the people that you know closest to you, right? So I always encourage the students that I work with, create peer groups amongst yourselves. So if you have classmates or friends who are also looking for jobs, if you're about to graduate or for summer internships, support each other, set up a regular check-in with each other so that there's that level of accountability. Say, for example, you have a business major and you're looking for an internship, and you have a friend who's an accounting major. You don't see a business internship, but hey, you come across an accounting internship, send it to your friend. They'll do the same for you. Support each other in this process. Another thing that I would recommend is, so with larger corporations, as Samantha said, LinkedIn is a fantastic tool to connect with individuals from HR to let them know that you have applied to an opening there. A lot of large companies have specific diversity initiatives where they're looking for candidates with disabilities. So look for those diversity or inclusion recruiters on LinkedIn and reach out to them, introduce yourself, have that elevator pitch ready. But for smaller companies, especially nonprofits, sometimes in an internship posting or a volunteer posting, they'll have the name of the person listed there. You know, email your resume to xyz@abc.com, where you have a specific person to reach out to. But, you know, send that, make it a friendly email, introduce yourself, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone, dial that small, mid-sized or nonprofit company's number, and just say, hi, I'm trying to connect with this individual. I saw that you are recruiting for volunteers in your department, and I'm really interested to help in any way that I can, and see what they have available. If you want to stay in your local community, just Google nonprofits in your community, select one that speaks to you, their mission speaks to you. And even if they don't have a formal posting online, again, you can just pick up the phone and you can even create a volunteer opportunity for yourself. It happens all the time.
That's awesome advice. Great advice there. I'm wondering what some resources might be when we're looking at considering the virtual job application process and how that's different. So Breandan, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Sure. I think something that's crucial in this preparation stage, so when you're considering applying for jobs, no matter what stage you're at, so early stage, you're just looking around, or you're already making applications or getting ready for interviews, I would say to consider your audience. So do your homework on who your audience is. Depending on which company you're applying to or which organization you're applying to, they'll be different one from the other. And just like before, I was talking about values and how we look inside ourselves to find what are the 2 or 3 most important things for us that we want to convey. We also have to find out as best we can what are those 2 or 3 things about the company, about the audience that we're speaking to. So it might be that diversity really matters to them. And so that means we can cover that in our interview or in our application and create that sense of resonance, you know, that we fit with them, that our values and what we care about fits with what they care about. So diversity could be one, perhaps it's a global reach and they've got a presence in different countries and that's something that appeals to you. Perhaps you speak foreign languages. So essentially what you're doing is you're getting to know your audience by talking to people who work there, researching online, try and build a picture of who is it that you're about to talk to at the organization, whether it's HR or a hiring manager. What can you find out about them? What makes them tick? And how can you authentically resonate with them? Because often there's things that will align very nicely. And an example that comes up a lot is sport. You know, many of us have interest in sport, and also music's another one. That's often a great resonance point with a person that you're speaking to, even if it is over Zoom and it's not in person. So there can be all sorts of points of resonance. So really do your homework about the audience to figure out as much as you can about them, and then that will help you press the right buttons when it comes to writing applications and having a good interview.
Great. Thanks so much, Breandan. Samantha, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yes, I thought that was great, Breandan. I sort of took a different tact on this, I guess, with resources. In my mind, I was thinking, what are other places that are out there that are free places to find openings? And I wanted to say that besides LinkedIn or Indeed, there are lots of other job sites that are that help find positions for you. For instance, here in Austin, we've got something called Built in Austin, and they list all the technology jobs. So there's probably something, I know many of you are in the Northeast, and there are probably side sites as well that will help you navigate finding them. So I don't know how to find those in your area, but I'll bet you if you do some good research on the internet, those might come up. Also on Facebook here, we have a digital jobs group, which they basically, it's a closed group that you can ask to join, and then they list all the technology jobs. And often people are saying, hey, my company's hiring, I will be happy to recommend you. And, you know, this is a great inside way of getting a recommendation without knowing anybody. And there might be those in the Northeast as well. And certainly many of these ones on Austin Digital Jobs are remote. So you all might just ask to join Austin Digital Jobs Facebook group and look at remote positions if you're in the tech space, that they are typically tech oriented. As well as in our area, there are a lot of free job search help support groups. There's Launchpad, Job Club, and Hired Texas, and some others where these are just people who are kind people who want to help others get jobs, and they arrange free speakers and free help and free resume reviews. And so I'm sure that there are like-minded people in your areas. So see if you can seek those out. You know, just Google free job search or free job networking groups, and, you know, find people that are willing to help you. Also search online job fairs. There's a lot of that going on right now. It used to be you go in person, but now they're online. The city hosts them, the state hosts them. So definitely, you know, do a lot of that kind of work where you're looking for anything that's out there that's going on that you could join in with.
Awesome. So Khadija, I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about disclosure, especially given that most of our audience is individuals with a visual impairment or who are blind. Could you talk to us a little bit about what disclosure is and how that works?
Definitely. So I think this kind of links to the application process and really breaking it down into stages. So in this application and eventually the hiring process, the way it looks like is you have your initial documents ready. You have your resume and your cover letter. The next step is submission. And then what generally follows if you're selected is a phone screen followed by an in-person interview or now a video interview. So you have different stages in order to disclose your disability. I just want to identify that disclosing your disability is not just letting the interviewer or the employer know that, by the way, I'm blind or I have low vision, but it's also identifying, hi, I'm visually impaired, and these are the tools or the accommodations that I use to do my job just like everybody else. So it's important to be aware of what are the accommodations that you will be needing in the workplace, to be aware of that, whether that be JAWS or another screen reader on a computer, whether that be a magnifier or a CCTV, whether that just, if reading glasses is all you need, that's great. If you need certain lighting, if you can't sit next to a window, like all these things you should be aware of when walking into a workplace so that you know how to advocate for yourself and what to ask for. Because you might be the first visually impaired person the employer is having the opportunity to work with. They want to help, but they're just not always sure how to do it. So it's important for you to know. In terms of mentioning your or disclosing your visual impairment in a resume or a cover letter, it's a very personal choice. Disclosure, how you choose to do it and when you choose to do it is completely your decision, and whether you choose to do it at all. But generally what I say is in a resume or a cover letter, yeah, you can talk about your visual impairment, but what other things are you really outlining in your resume and cover letter? You're outlining your qualifications. What makes you a good fit for this job? So for example, if you are working or you're applying to work for a company that serves individuals with disabilities, in this case, your disability counts as lived experience. It puts you in that situation where you are somewhat familiar with what the people that you're going to be serving are going through or are feeling or are experiencing, and you can relate to them. So in situations like that, I would say, yes, you can mention your disability and how it actually, it's an advantage. It's essentially counting as a qualification in a position, in a job like that. So yeah, you can mention it there. I know a lot of blind professionals who don't exactly disclose, but they, in their resume, where you have your leadership section or extracurricular activities, they'll mention that they're a member of a blindness organization, or they have an affiliation, or they received an award or a scholarship from like an NFB or an AFB or ACB. So, so for them, it's not exactly saying, yes, I'm blind. It's stating an affiliation, and then the recruiter can sort of connect the dots however they like. So there's options. Then if you don't, if there's the next stage that comes in the process is your phone screen. Again, they can't see you, you can't see them. It's just a verbal conversation. So if you feel that that's the point where you want to talk about it, say that maybe the next step is in person. Maybe you feel you'll just need a guide to get from the front desk, the front security desk, to the elevator or to the interview room. And you feel like this is a good time, if they contact me for an in-person interview, I want to talk about it over the phone, that I'm going to need assistance getting to my interview room once I arrive on site. So if that's the time you choose to do it, that's okay too. Say the next step is an in-person or a video interview. Now it's face-to-face. There is some level of visual interaction that's taking place between you and the interviewer. And again, you have that option, whether you choose to do it beginning, middle, or end of the conversation, to have that discussion about accommodations, because they would like to help you. They sometimes are just not sure how to do it. So it's important for you to have that discussion.
That is awesome, Khadija. Thank you. I feel like I learned so much about disclosure just in your answer there. Okay, terrific. So actually our last question of the panel is for Breandan, and that is, can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that this COVID-19 pandemic has helped students, or can help students, to really think about their career interests and values and what's important to them?
Sure. I'm building on what Khadija said, like it was so great to hear the process and the steps involved in making this decision around disclosure, which is a very personal one. Just consider that for a moment. The fact that those of us with sight loss or those of us who are blind have to go through this additional process in preparing for an interview, it means for me that we just have to be better prepared, you know, we just have to be better prepared. And I think in the COVID world, what's happened is everyone has all of a sudden been forced, or most people have been forced to work from home. And that's been tough for a lot of people, and a lot of change has been expected of them quite quickly. For anyone with a disability, the chances are pretty high, I would say, that we've had to adapt every day of our lives, whether it's a disability that arises during our youth or adulthood. Whatever the scenario is, we will have had to adapt, and adapting to things and adapting to change and not having the external world as we need it to be is something that actually I would say we have as a strength. So even though there's clearly challenges, right? There's clearly challenges that COVID brings to all of us, whether we have a disability or not. I do think there's a lot of adaptability practice that we have had to have during all of our lives. And of course, some of it's very tough, but it gives us a skill that I think actually puts us in front of the so-called mainstream. So don't forget that the little adjustments and adapting and learning new things that you've had to do, sometimes exhilarating, sometimes frustrating, that's training a muscle in you. It's trained a muscle in a lot of us on the panel. We've gone through this, and we want to stretch out, if you like, a net underneath this tightrope of recruitment and getting employment. It seems like a tightrope often, and it can be quite hard, especially during COVID times. What we want to say to you is trust that you have this ability, you have a strength based on your life experience that many others don't have. And if anything about COVID, you can actually turn that into a positive in your applications and in your job interviews.
That is a beautiful, such a strengths-based answer. I love it. And I think that is a perfect way to end our formalized panel and move it over back to Abigail, Katie, and Kristen for some Q&A questions.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. So now we'd love to open it up to the guests, to students and those tuning in. If you have a question, feel free to add it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. It's Alt-Y on a PC, Option-Y on a Mac, or *9 if you're calling in. I'm sorry if you're on the Zoom app. It's been a bit since I was on there. I think it's under the More options. But one question that came in through our registration form, that if we want to do maybe a round robin about productivity and what are some tools that you all use to stay productive working on assignments or projects, whether it's like an app or maybe even just a, you know, good old pen and paper. Does anybody have any tools that they particularly like to use to stay on task?
I know for me, it's such a silly thing, but sometimes I'll look at the task that I'm working on and say, okay, I estimate that this is going to take me a half hour, and I'll actually set a timer on my phone for a half hour. And it's almost like a little, you know, kind of check in with myself at that half hour point. Like, did you finish? Are you done? Are you close to being done? Can we reevaluate if you need more time, or do you need to take a quick break to walk around and stretch your legs and then come back and revisit? And, you know, try setting another half hour timer. I feel like that helps me a lot.
I agree with that. I also use calendar alerts. If I know I've got to get something done by a certain time, I'll say to myself, okay, I'm going to set a calendar alert in the morning, better do this by noon, and then set another one saying better be done, so that it interrupts my, if I get sidetracked, it reminds me.
I've got one that's unorthodox in that it's not a technological one. I find myself, as you get frustrated, often with screen readers and all of the extra challenges, of accessing information quickly, you can get tired and worn out, and I find that when I get to that stage and your productivity is suffering, less is more. So take a break, take a cup of that nice tea you've got, or coffee, or even go out for a quick walk around the block, because actually when productivity starts to suffer, often your way out of that is to pause, not try to do what I always used to do, which is double down and try and go faster and then get more tired. Is actually just take five, breathe, take some deep breaths, get some mint tea, take a walk around the block. You'd be surprised how internally, your mindset changes, and what seems like frustration and being behind actually can shift into a more positive can-do kind of mindset. So there's a non-tech option as well, if you like that.
Yeah, I love what Brandon said. Like me personally, I'm addicted to my Google Calendar and setting timers and alarms like Caitlin and Samantha said. But yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes you need to give yourself that break. Like there are evenings or something where I have a deadline and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do it. I need to take a break. Like, again, just getting up, walking around, stretching a little bit. We did it in the office, but now that we're working from home, I think where your home is no longer just a place you come and relax and unwind. It also is now the place where you work. And it's really important to having that routine, as was mentioned earlier, and define those spaces in your home, whether it be a table and a chair, and that's your space to focus on work. And when you walk away from that, you kind of need to give your mind other space to explore other activities to stay productive.
I love all of those, the high tech and the just, have a cup of tea, go for a walk. Those are all important to our taking care of ourselves and continuing to do good and effective work. I'm going to see if Khadija, you want to respond to this one. Yumer asked in the chat if LinkedIn is accessible to those using screen readers. And I know you've worked a lot with students, particularly in building their resumes in LinkedIn. What are your thoughts or feedback on that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm low vision myself and I am a screen reader user. So I think LinkedIn is essentially now the only social media that I'm on, embarrassing to say, but yeah, both the LinkedIn mobile app is very user-friendly, and they've made a lot of updates to their website, and it's very screen reader accessible. I personally have not had any complaints. I used to about 2 or 3 years ago, but as of recently, they've made a lot of updates. So yeah, it's pretty screen reader friendly.
Great. And Jose has a question. I'm not 100% certain I understand, so feel free to come off mute if you want to ask, but it looks like you're interested about how to drop clues about wanting more leadership or to get management experience. Okay, so you want some feedback on how moving up like in the ranks to gain more managerial experience. I don't know, Samantha or Brandon, do you have thoughts on that?
Sure. First of all, excel at your job. You have to be the best one at your job so that they'll be interested in hearing from you. And then I would say ask your boss or the person above you if you could set a time to talk to them about, a larger discussion about future. And then in that conversation, go in and review yourself a bit. Say, I'd like to just sort of get feedback from you and give you my feedback on my performance. And I'd like to see what it might take, ask you what it might take, what else can I do or how else can I achieve in order to show you that I'm interested in getting more responsibility. And I think rather than saying moving up in management, I think saying I'd like bigger challenges and I'd like more responsibility is a bit better than just locking yourself into, I want to be a manager, because one never knows. It might be you get to be the key account guy now or something. So those would be the words I'd use. But I think having a purposeful meeting, being businesslike about it, showing that you can manage by doing that is the way to do it.
I would agree 100% with Samantha, and I see Jose's just writing there in the chat room. It's like asking someone on a date. If you never ask, you'll never get. So managers are not mind readers. We might think because we really want to be in that office in the corner, or we really want to have manager in our job title, if we want it enough, that our bosses will know that. The truth is, they'll never know that unless we say it. And as Samantha said, we have to want it for the right reasons. Like if we just wanted to be a manager, that might be short-lived success. What we really want is to reach the level of performance that attracts the manager title or attracts the manager promotion. So whether you have one boss or three bosses, your goal should be, how do I reach the level of performance, the scope of role, the impact that then attracts that promotion or what have you. And it might be that in your organization that doesn't come because there's a limit on promotions, or no amount of trying will actually get you there because of perhaps, you know, it just won't be the right fit for you in that company. But your goal is always, first and foremost, achieve that greater impact, as Samantha said. And then you'll know if you're in the right organization, talk to your managers, and the promotion will come. But if it's not the right place and time for you, stay true to that impact, because that's the thing that will guide you. And, you know, the promotion will come after.
Right. And I just wanted to add to that, like when preparing for this conversation with your supervisor, and this is something a mentor of mine told me, make sure you're keeping track of your accomplishments. You want to start listing them down as they take place, because it's hard to think back, like, what did I do 6 months ago or a year ago? So just start on the side. Like you don't even have to be thinking about a promotion. This could be helping you in another interview in the future, but just start keeping track of your accomplishments on your current job, and that'll help you as well.
Agreed. I tell people to keep their job listing whenever you get a job, any job, always keep the original job posting and then measure yourself as to, are you doing all those things and how well have you done and what benchmarks are there, percentages, or, you know, who knows, but, you know, increased revenue, that kind of thing. What have you been responsible for? How many additional accounts have you brought in, or how many more dollars have you brought from this particular original client that was already a client? So yes, agreed with you on that. And he's saying he's got a lot of bosses. Maybe that's the problem. There's too many bosses. They need to not have so many. And I think Breandan might be right. Get out of there. Go work someplace else, maybe. But anyway, I'm just kidding. But if you have a lot of bosses, then talk to each one serially. Talk to one, then talk to the other. They'll probably all talk to each other, but that's okay. The squeaky wheel is who gets the oil.
Yeah. Excellent. I really like that suggestion of using a past position as like your own self-evaluation or ruler, Samantha. So that's great. We only have a few minutes left, but Brylan wanted to hear from the panelists about your first jobs out of college. So maybe we could do abbreviated versions from each of you. Whoever would like to start.
So my first job out of college was I worked at an independent living center for a year. Undergrad, I was an education and English double major and was convinced I was going to be the next best high school English teacher in the country. And then working at an independent living center for a year helped me to realize I really didn't like doing that. And I wanted to become a social worker. So it was a good experience overall.
I can go next. I literally got my first job. It was during a recession at the time. And I was talking to my professor, and she was moonlighting sort of. She was an adjunct professor and she had a real job at Head Sportswear. And I talked to her all the time because I just thought she was so amazing. And she ended up saying to me, you know, you seem really bright. Are you interested in a part-time job after you graduate? I could do a part-time job as my assistant, and then we'd have to figure out you doing something else part-time. And I said, absolutely. I did it because part-time, even if it's part-time, you don't have to say part-time on your resume or LinkedIn. I was her assistant. She was the director of marketing. Boom, there you go. I was off and running.
Mine was an internship at a bank in London, and it was also a conversation with a lecturer, a professor in college. So it definitely pays to do the rounds with your professors and lecturers and talk to them, because going back to some of the points from earlier, they are also contacts who know you and who have a vested interest in your success. So make sure to discuss openly both your hopes and your questions with your current teachers and professors.
Yeah, my trajectory is a little bit non-traditional. So I actually completed my undergrad in my home country of Pakistan, and after that is when I moved to the United States. And over there isn't a whole lot of emphasis placed on work experience while in college. So essentially my resume had, I think, maybe a 2-month volunteer opportunity when I was in high school, and that's pretty much it. And when I came here is when I wanted to apply to grad school. I felt like I need to have a degree from the US in order to work in the US. So my bachelor's, I had a double major in economics and finance, and then I eventually pursued my master's in economics. But as soon as I came here and I started sending out those graduate essays, I was desperate. I was like, I need to put something concrete on these essays. And the first thing that I did, I think about 2 months of moving here, was networking and connecting with an internship while I applied to grad school, studied for my GREs, etc. And then throughout grad school, I didn't have any gap on my resume. I was either volunteering or interning while I was taking classes and working on my thesis. So sorry about the noise in the back, but so essentially, and all those opportunities I found through networking. I read this article in Forbes where 60% of the jobs in the US are secured through networking. So really, when we spoke about it earlier, whether it be in person or online, networking is really key in your internship and job search process.
So great. And thank you all for sharing a little bit more about yourselves and your storyline. I want to thank you all again so much for spending time with us, especially Breandan. He is in London. And for those of us on the East Coast, he's 5 hours ahead. So he's probably going to head off to bed after this. So thank you especially, but all of you, this was really great. I'm in the chat. I'm adding a link to our NAA scholarship. The deadline is November 30th. So for undergraduate students who are blind or low vision in your senior year, or if you're in grad school, please consider applying. It's an amazing scholarship. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can email csp@learningally.org. This will be going up on YouTube too, so you can share it with friends or look back on your own later. So thank you all for coming, and thank you all of our panelists and moderators. This has been a great time.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Good night.